Welcome to California Unfiltered, the podcast where we cut through the noise and deliver the raw truth about the Golden State's most pressing issues. I'm your host, Marc Ruiz Evans. Today, we're diving into some explosive topics: the curious partnership between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and Governor Gavin Newsom's controversial decision on immigration policy. That and much more here at California Unfiltered. Let's get started. In our first piece of news, we turn to an article by G.B. Wire, which was a reprint or a summary of an article by Politico magazine. Politico magazine is one of the most respected political coverage magazines in America. Next, we turn to Governor Gavin Newsom and his decision to veto a bill that would limit state prisons from cooperating with ICE, a move that has sparked heated debate across California. We're going to talk about what is Assembly Bill 15 and its implications for California's sanctuary policies. We'll also be looking at the context of Newsom's history of vetoing similar measures, an analysis of the political implications, and the discussion of public reaction and community impact. Now, I did a deep dive on the original article, and then I also read the Politico article in depth. The reference for that is Newsom vows to veto measure protecting criminals from deportation by Christopher Catalago on 2/13/2025. That's the reference. So, Governor Gavin Newsom is vowing to veto a Democratic-led bill that would limit state prison officials from cooperating with federal immigration agents, just as President Donald Trump promises mass deportations. Newsom has said in a prior version of the new bill, which he rejected last year, would go too far by impeding how the state's sprawling prison system interacts with federal law enforcement agencies charged with assessing public safety risk. Assembly Bill 15, authored by Democratic state lawmaker, seeks to expand the sanctuary law, known as SB 54, to include the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. It would, among other provisions, prohibit the state's prison system from holding a person in custody because ICE requests it, sharing the release date with federal government, responding to its request for information, or transferring individuals to ICE custody. Now, what this is built upon is the idea that California is a sanctuary city. A couple of years ago, California provided driver's license to undocumented immigrants here in California. That number is somewhere about 1.8 million, somewhere around 2 million undocumented immigrants, according to the California Department of Finance, based upon U.S. federal census projections, live here in California. Many years ago, they had the idea to give undocumented immigrants a driver's license. That was expanded to basically providing a variety of government services for the undocumented despite their citizenship status. This all comes from kind of the aftermath of a political movement in the 1990s known as Proposition 187. Ironically, the police code for murder, death, kill. I didn't pick the name. Proposition 187 was during Governor Wilson, Pete Wilson's term, former San Diego mayor, and it said basically that all government services would be cut off from any undocumented person. You would be effectively reduced to second-class citizenship, or the way that Jews and communists were sort of treated in Nazi Germany right before the Holocaust happened. There was a period where they were removing rights, placing people as second-class citizenship, and then they actually started the roundup. So California's trying to do that in the 1990s. This is also the same time where California had the idea that it'd be great to reaffirm that English is the dominant language. You can kind of see these are cultural signaling sort of moves in the 1990s. As Gavin Newsom said, I think about 4 to 5 years ago, California went through its Trump age. We went through it in the 1990s. America went through it in the year 2016, or about 3 decades later. As we've often said, things happen in California, and then about 30 to 40 years later, they happen in America. So we had our vitriolic period full of jingoistic phrases and xenophobia and latent racism and dog whistling messaging against primarily Latinos, but basically against diversity. Around this time in the 1990s, along with English as the first language, Prop 187 banning government services for immigrations was a push to repeal affirmative action. So you can see how if you go back to the 1990s, there was a push to kind of destroy diversity and let diverse people know that you weren't welcome and to curtail it and kind of lock that down. Now we're here with Donald Trump. This is his second return, and as I like to say, it's his third time running. So he's basically defined the last 10 years of politics, even though he was only in office for 2 terms during that period. One of the things that he's done is gone after sanctuary cities. So he has criticized California's sanctuary cities policy famously after the Palisades fire, when Californians were burned alive and dead and their charred bodies were on the ground and people were homeless and they were destitute and they were in a disaster zone and they were in shock and panic. Trump decided to say, I'm not sure I want to help you guys in California because I don't really like you. And then the next thing he did was say, well, maybe I'll give you federal funds if you change the way you handle the undocumented immigrants. So I'm going to strong arm you on the sanctuary cities policy when you're basically on your deathbed. And I think that that is politically acceptable in America to do. He's done that recently. Part of the issue now is Governor Newsom. When we look at the Palisades fire, Governor Newsom was asked about it, and the first thing out of his mouth was, that's a local issue, don't blame me. Apparently that really pissed off Californians. They didn't think that it was a good look when people are dead and homeless and destitute and in shock, that you're the highest ranking elected official in California and your only commentary is not my fault. For all of his faults, Governor Schwarzenegger, who's roundly criticized as not being that great at politics, was on the scene during every single disaster, and nobody has anything negative to say about him as far as disaster response. That guy was there within 5 minutes, on the ground, hugging everybody, giving bottles of water, shaking hands, giving blankets, telling everybody it's going to be fixed, and handing out personal contact information. Newsom done none of that. His first reaction was, don't blame me, because he wants to be the president of America. So when the Palisades fire was brought to him, he didn't say, we're going to take care of these people. He didn't say, as governor, I'm in charge of the 3% of California's forest where this happened, and it's on my watch. What he said was, it's a local issue. It has nothing to do with me, so don't blame me in any way for anything going on. And then he proceeded to not ask about how the people were doing or lay out steps to fix the problem. That seemed to really upset Californians. I've had this debate with numerous people, and they go, Newsom's just horrible. And I go, read the dates of the newspapers. He was not hated by Californians when the Palisades fire happened. It was after he made that comment. That's when that happened. So Newsom is in hot water for making that comment. He's taken a lot of political heat. Talk of a second recall election is abounding. That would basically ruin his presidential chances if you had to go through 2 recall elections, and then you're going to run for president. Sorry. So now that you have that background, let me reintroduce this to you. They wanted to Assembly Bill 15, authored by Democratic state lawmaker, seeks to expand sanctuary law, known as SB 54, to include California's Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations. In a few instances where Newsom previously signaled his early intentions on legislation, such as last year's proposal ban on youth tackle football, lawmakers quickly shelved them. Newsom's move to extinguish the immigration legislation just weeks after it was introduced, this time by Los Angeles area Assemblymember Mike Gibson, confirms the governor is in no mood to expand the sanctuary policies signed by his predecessor, former Democratic Governor Jerry Brown, who had specifically sought to keep prisons out of the original law. Here's the thing. This article is acting like the sanctuary cities policy was pushed exclusively by Governor Jerry Brown. That's a total lie. Newsom was 100% all about sanctuary city policies and all about how we don't care what Trump says and we're all about sanctuary cities policies. So ironically, somehow, don't ask me to explain, They completely forget to mention that in this Politico article that Newsom was as prominent in supporting California's sanctuary city state status opposite federal regulation as Jerry Brown. This article makes it seem like Jerry Brown did that and then Newsom just kind of hang on to the policies. That is completely false and totally incorrect. And anybody that looks at the history will see he was just as big a proponent. I think what's actually happening is, like I said, Newsom's under hot water for his response to the Palisades fire. He needs the Palisades fire issue to go away. That means he needs federal money. He needs to be seen as though he's doing everything possible to fix the fire issue. He can't get that unless he plays nice with Trump. Trump will cut off funds. Trump has already said that he would cut off funds. And as we've explained here at CalExit, the federal government has approved Trump's right to cut off funds to California for pursuing sanctuary cities policies. Now, Newsom never brought that up, and neither did Attorney General Rob Bonta, but that's the law, and I think that's what's playing out here. Newsom's backing down on a fight with Donald Trump because he needs Trump right now, not for California's benefit, but for his own political future for himself alone. He needs the federal money. He needs to be seen as though he's working with Trump, and he needs to be seen as fixing the Palisades thing. That comes first over anything else. Why? Because he cares? No. Because he was caught on the wrong foot dealing with the Palisades fire, and he needs the issue to go away so that there's no second recall attempt so he can still be in line to run for president of America in the future, given that in the political terms, he's basically considered a fetus. He's very young. Politicians can run in their 50s and 60s. That's considered a prime age. He's exceptionally young. So he has another 10 to 15 years of potentially running for the presidency in the Democratic Party. And he's already well known in California. So wants to secure his image. That's why he's backing down on these policies. They're not mentioning it here in this article, but in Trump's first term, Newsom was very fiercely for California doing its own thing, regardless of what the federal government says, and about being a sanctuary city-state. Now, this article in Politico is trying to act like has no mood for the former sanctuary policies by his predecessor. That's total garbage. Also, here we go. On Wednesday, as the Trump administration escalated standoff with state and local government over deportations, Attorney General Pam Bondi signaled out a law in New York that granted driver's license to undocumented people. Bondi said New York's green light law compels state officials to tip off an illegal alien, undocumented immigrant, about federal inquiries, which she deemed unconstitutional. Bondi's New suit against New York follows a similar action the Justice Department filed against Illinois last week. The case alleges Illinois violates federal law by impeding communication between local and federal law enforcement. So California is giving driver's license to undocumented. California is impeding cooperation between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. The federal government now under Trump is specifically attacking states who have policies that are identical to California's. Newsom may be thinking that if he gives Trump some sort of cooperation, like he won't push back on the prisons working with Trump, that maybe Trump will be less aggressive on coming after California's other undocumented immigrant sanctuary policies. That might be what Newsom's thinking. Give Trump a little bit of a win so he's not as aggressive as coming after California. If that's the strategy, that's going to totally fail. So when you show weakness to Trump, what that tells him is to attack more because you're weak and now can be defeated. Trump only stalls out when he's challenged and forced to back down. California famously did that during his last term. We only won 50% of the time, but we were willing to shut down freeway grids and challenge everything that he did. And we had the most vociferous politically elected officials who became famous challenging Trump. This looks like Newsom backing down the Trump very early on. He's politically weak, which means now he's not able to stand up for California. That's my read. There might be a chance that he's trying to protect California from further impact from Trump's Justice Department. However, I question that because last time that Newsom was governor and Trump was president, the attitude was challenge every single legal trial by Trump automatically. So We have $50 million. We're going to challenge everything he says in court. So the attitude last time was, is the federal government going after New York's green light laws? Challenge him in court. Is the federal government going after Illinois' laws? Challenge him in court. So nowhere in this article is it mentioned that Newsom is saying he wants to challenge these things in court, which is also unique and different because last time that's what he would have routinely said and Bonta would have said. But there's no comment from Bonta or Newsom in this, and it does look politically self-serving on the surface. Now, maybe he's trying to play the game out, but when you are weak as a politician, you're not really able to stand and fight for your people. And right now he's worried about securing his place and not being recalled by his people, which means he can't actually provide that strong, robust leadership that California needs against Trump at this moment. That's what I see. Tom Homan, Trump's top advisor on immigration enforcement, also has threatened criminal prosecutions of local officials who interfere with federal efforts to carry out the mass deportations, which Bondi didn't rule out. Famously, I think it was Libby Schiff was the female mayor of Oakland when Trump was first elected and said that she would directly not work with federal immigration officials to round up people. I believe Jeff Sessions, who is the attorney general at the time, threatened with her with arrest, and she said basically bring it. There were other California officials who said, go ahead. I would love to see the federal government come in and arrest a seated elected official for doing things within the local laws. Nothing like that has happened since 1865. So go ahead, do it. Let's see what it looks like on camera, where you're arresting elected officials for doing things within the confines of the law as they exist here in California. Let's see what happens. That was the reaction from California lawmakers. We're going to find out if they're as brave this time. Newsom has been extremely focused extensively in recent weeks on the massive wildfires that tore through Los Angeles and ensuing recovery effort, and has not been vocal about immigration enforcement, even if he's taken some measures to protect undocumented Californians. That's key. So Newsom has approved $50 million for a legal defense fund, and he did call for a special legislative session to talk about how to deal with Trump. And he has empowered and appointed, or Bonta won, and he's been empowered by Newsom to help fight back. But this is kind of interesting. This is literally what I said. Newsom has said nothing about Trump's immigration enforcement. If you watched the last episode, we talked about how people who've been here 15 to 20 years have no criminal records, are being ripped away from their family and forced into detention camps, and they just basically disappear. 50% of the undocumented immigrants who have been rounded up under Trump during his second term have no violent criminal history at all. So when America turned back the roll on abortion, Governor Newsom was famously vocal about that. He spent money to put billboards in other states to let them know that decision was wrong, and he would routinely go on television and did a bunch of interviews saying how the abortion decision by the Supreme Court was wrong. And yet, even though half the people are not criminal, and even though good Californians are being ripped apart from families and forced into detention centers where they basically disappear, according to this article, Newsom has said absolutely nothing about that. Didn't criticize it, said nothing. And now he's backing down on an undocumented immigrant bill in response to Trump. And what does this article say? He's focused extensively on recent weeks on the massive wildfires and the ensuing recovery effort because he did so horrible responding to the Palisades. He knows he has to fix this problem or he's politically done, which means he can't be president, and he has this thought that he can. So this, I didn't even read this section here till the end. This section completely, I'm not saying which it is, I don't know the man's mind, but this section would seem to lend credence to the theory that Newsom is scared, doesn't have the power, wants the Palisades issue to go away, and he's willing to give Trump whatever he wants and back down to him so that Newsom can preserve his political future, rather than the alternative option that perhaps Newsom is seeing more onerous Trumpian regulations coming, and he's trying to give Trump some sort of win so that Trump won't be as egregious pushing against California with those laws in the future. That is not how Newsom acted last time. That is not how California acted last time. That is not how Newsom said California was going to act the day after Trump got elected. And it's quite bizarre that he can say absolutely nothing about the undocumented roundups. They're not being done right. There's lots of undocumented here. The largest ethnic group in California is Latinos, and the undocumented people being treated wrong is an important issue for Latinos. Kind of weird that the governor can say absolutely nothing about that at all. Specifically, Bonta has advised, that's the Attorney General of California, that federal immigration officials can't force cities, counties, or state law enforcement agents to do what he described as the federal government's job in enforcing the immigration law. What is not mentioned in this article, but you'll only see here, is that the federal government has said California cannot force its law enforcement agencies to not work with the federal government, and it cannot force any business in California to not work with immigration officials. So you're not going to see this in this article, as we've been explaining here. When Bonta and Newsom, the governor and the attorney general, get on TV, it's, we're going to fight, we're going to fight. You'll never hear they lost 50% of the time. You'll never hear that people died. You'll never hear that they backed down on certain challenges. And here we go. Here's we're going to make sure the federal officials can't work with any state or county law enforcement. You completely lost that case in federal court a few years ago, and yet you can't mention that here in this article. So Bonta again forgot to mention federal courts ruled California can do nothing to enforce local police or businesses from cooperating. Funny how that's not mentioned in the article at all, in addition to the 50% losses from last time. Finally, the new law that Governor Newsom's pushing back on, the law allows the prison system to notify and coordinate with ICE to take custody of people convicted of felonies who have served their terms. Records obtained from the Newsom administration show that since he took office in 2019, California correctional system has notified and coordinated with ICE on the transfer of nearly 10,600 inmates in federal custody. So while California was a sanctuary state and it was preventing its jails and other law enforcement infrastructure from cooperating with the federal government, it hadn't yet expanded the sanctuary cities policies to the prisons. So now there's a law by Democratic lawmakers to expand the sanctuary cities policies to the prisons, and Newsom is saying he's going to stop that. Technically, that doesn't stop any of the sanctuary cities bills or laws that have existed over the last close to 10 years that make California a sanctuary state. So we're not losing our status as a sanctuary state. It's just some people in California want to go further, and the governor's stopping that. Maybe that's the right decision. Maybe he honestly does think it's too far. Maybe he is worried about pushing the Trump administration too far and having them push back. But it's also strange because his whole attitude the last term and right after Trump got elected and the day that Trump was voted in was, we're going to fight, 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 fight like hell. This doesn't send that same energy. To me, that's bizarre and strange. That's up for you to figure out what's going on. That's our analysis, and we'll leave it there. We're going to move on to our next section. Now here's part two, our next section. Trump and Elon Musk, a controversial partnership. Our first topic today explores the unusual alliance between two of America's most polarizing figures, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and what it means for California and beyond. We want to look at Elon Musk's role in Trump's administration as co-head of the Department of Government Efficiency. We want to look at Musk's controversial straight-arm gesture Nazi salute at Trump's inauguration rally and fallout. Was that just trolling? What's your opinion? And we want to look about Trump's Musk for Fox News interview, as well as Musk's proposal for tax refunds for Doge savings and whether it's feasible or just political theater. So first off, I'll tell you that it is highly unusual for somebody who's not a cabinet pick to be as intimately involved with the president. Musk, basically, from what I can tell, and I'm not there and I'm going off third-hand information, appears to be welded to Donald Trump's hip. and able to be in the Oval Office, White House, dealing with all sorts of issues with him at incredible levels of intimacy. They did a Fox News interview recently, and I was reading an article about that, and it was said, you know, they were laughing and hugging each other and completing each other's sentences and saying how well they really like each other. That was the interview with Hannity. Okay, maybe, but there's also a video of, and I can't tell, but it appears to be, and I'm not making this up, Elon Musk's son. He appears to be about a toddler's age, and he's saying, you shut your mouth and you're not really the president. So is that just a little boy popping off and saying things? Because, you know, little boys, little girls, they say things. And we want kids to have imaginations and kind of be their own person. And you got to kind of teach them to, you know, behave. And I used to have a potty mouth, too, when I was a kid. And you got to, you know, be disciplined. That's one option. The other option that I've heard from a lot of intelligent liberals is that children repeat things they hear from their parents. In which case that means that Elon Musk is saying Trump should shut his mouth and that Trump isn't really the president. Musk is. I don't know, wasn't there, not in Elon's brain, but I can tell you children repeat what their parents say routinely. That phrase was particular. It was very specific. And for a child to go, I'm just going to imagine a very specific phrase, which seems to suggest a power structure dynamic that the American people can't get, is bizarre on its own. I don't believe that's something children would typically philosophize about or conjecture on, so that's kind of bizarre. He's talking about adult level things. Why is a 2 to 4 year old talking about adult level things if this is just child wordplay? Again, don't know for sure, but if we're looking on what's most likely, there's a thing called Occam's razor, and it says the easiest solution usually is the correct one. If going by Occam's razor, which I'm not saying what it is, then it would look like Elon Musk is walking around as though he's president, saying it all the time, and Trump's allowed to be embarrassed by his child live on television. Trump, to the best of my knowledge, didn't come back and contradict those statements. Additionally, a lot of people are asking, why is Elon Musk being asked about Trump about so much to do with the White House? Presidents typically have advisors, but they're typically people who've been in politics for a while. They're not a total outsider with zero political experience or political capital, which Elon Musk is. He is a complete neophyte newbie. He has no background in this. And yet he's basically telling the president how to run all sorts of things. That's bizarre. You'd have to go back to George H.W. Bush. W. Bush, who did the Iraq War, and look at his relationship with his political advisor, Karl Rove. Now, Karl Rove had been in Republican politics for 3 decades to help people win elections. He was never actually a White House advisor. He had never been a policy advisor. But W. Bush had him at every single presidential meeting he held. That was highly unorthodox and bizarre and strange and not normal. That was about, I don't know, that was around 2005. We're in 2024. You got to go back about 20 years to find an example where somebody brought a total outsider with no political experience, no vetting, who'd never been in either party, and then asked them, what's your opinion on every single thing I do? Before Karl Rove and W. Bush, I think you got to go back to like Andrew Jackson, when you can find a president is just letting people without political experience or background or vetting advise them at this level of intimacy. Now, presidents always have friends and they always have people come and advise them, but not at this level. So I'm not saying anything wrong is going on, but I am saying it's highly bizarre. This has maybe happened twice in the last 100 years. It basically never happens. You have insiders, but they've been in the Republican Party, or they've run for office, or they were a deputy this or deputy that, or they were a lawyer who advised something like this, something in the political world. There's absolutely a complete dearth of political expertise in Musk's resume. Rove, at least, while he had no government experience, had a lot of political experience. This is even worse than what W did with Rove. W with Rove would look at this and go, damn, that's extreme. And what W did was extreme. So we are at the most extreme version of my outside friend helps run the country with me. that we've seen in basically a century, maybe going back to the beginning. It's highly bizarre. Musk has no experience in government and has no contacts in government or the Republican Party. He's literally starting fresh, and he's being able to take the top job without having any previous work experience in that field at all, or anyone vetting for him. Rove at least had that. And yes, he was born in Pretoria, South Africa, and immigrants are awesome, but there is a protection clause in the Constitution. Maybe it shouldn't be there, but it's been there for 200 years. And it says, right or wrong, good or bad, if you're not an American citizen, maybe you shouldn't have the full reins of power. Or if you're not naturally born American citizen, you shouldn't be president. And maybe you shouldn't have the full reins of power. If we go off what Elon Musk's child said, that we've completely abandoned that constitutional / moral philosophical rule going back 2 centuries. It's hard to tell. I will say, though, as a person who's not white, that to me, it definitely looked like a Nazi salute that Elon Musk did. I'm not familiar, nor have I ever seen somebody go from my heart and then straight out like that. I've never seen people do that before. I've watched a lot of speeches. I've been to a lot of political events. I've been in politics for over 10 years. I'm considered very well versed in politics. I've never seen that before. Some people are saying, oh, it's just an accident. And then I go, well, why do you do it twice? Right? If it's an accident, you do it once. You did it twice. Secondly, why did you not say anything right after, like, I'm offended this would be called a Nazi salute? Hell no, it's not that. You were silent. So to me, this looks exactly like the way Donald Trump does dog whistling, right? On the presidential campaign trail, he said, I'm for all Americans. I'm for Black Americans. I'm for Latino Americans. I'm for women Americans. I'm for Muslim Americans. And that sounds great. But he also, at the nomination convention for him in the Republican Party, said, I want to reenact the Eisenhower deportation plan, which was considered racist and called Operation Wetback, which is a horrible slur to Latin people. He also appointed his vice president, who got into office only after he won his Ohio race with a TV commercial that said, do you hate Mexicans? And then he appointed Stephen Miller, who's the only person the Congressional Hispanic Caucus has listed as an avowed white supremacist, as the Deputy Undersecretary for Immigration Reform. Now, when you talk to Trump fans, they go, he said he loves Latin people. True, he did say that. He also did all these other things. And to me, that's dog whistling, and it's very clear. Adolf Hitler kind of played the same game. As I love to say, even when Hitler was talking trash on the Jews, high-ranking SS officers could have Jewish girlfriends. They were basically models, but they were Jewish girls. So some people would be saying, I know Hitler's talking about I hate Jews and I want to get rid of the Jews and we don't need the Jews, but come on, look, these SS officers have these Jewish girlfriends. So therefore, we can assume it's just talk. He doesn't really mean it. He's just blowing off steam. If he meant it, he would make sure his SS officers couldn't date any Jewish girls. And since that's being allowed, we can just dismiss all the horrible things that he said. Turns out that analysis was 100% wrong. And all of the Jewish people who came to that analysis are now dead. All of the Jews who came to the opposite analysis of, I don't care about inconsistencies, when people talk this way consistently, you know damn well what it means. They're all alive. That's a key point in history. The people that looked at Hitler's wording and said this is a warning of the future are alive and had children and grandchildren who are alive. The Jews who looked at what Hitler said and said, there's some inconsistencies, therefore we can ignore it, are all dead. Their children were not born, and none of their grandchildren were born. Their lines are completely wiped out now. They may have existed in history in Europe for the last 600 years, and now they're permanently gone and we'll never see them again in the last 60. Decisions have consequences. That's what it ultimately comes down to. Do you believe a person's words, or do you believe their actions? We're going to find out, and we're going to find out real quick. For me, Elon Musk with his double Nazi salute that's not really a Nazi salute, that he can't say anything to walk back, is completely reminiscent of when Donald Trump appeared on the scene and said that all Latin people are rapists. Then he didn't explain himself. There was a massive backlash, and he took a photo of himself smiling and eating a taco salad as his response to all the criticisms from the millions of Latinos who were insulted. Didn't clarify, didn't say, hell no, that's not what I meant, said nothing. Issued a photo of him eating a taco salad and going, that was his response to millions of people like myself or my mother who had been crying for 3 days straight after seeing that because she never thought she'd seen an American president come on TV and say that we're all rapists and scumbags who bring disease. By the way, that's one of the tropes that Hitler brought. He always tied disease to Jews. If you look at Trump's first speech where he says Latin people are rapists, he introduces the concept that they bring disease. You want to look at marginalization speeches of dictators from the 1970s back to the 1880s, and you'll see that the phrase, they bring disease, is a key linchpin for we're going to round them up. Now, maybe that's not going to happen. Who knows the future? But people are creatures of habit. And while history may not repeat itself, it certainly rhymes. Also, we have not changed the genetic code of humans ever, which means the same motivations and thinking of humans in the 1930s are exactly the same today. We're basically the exact same species. So what we're planning on is that this isn't going to go bad, even though when you look at examples throughout history, it always does. That's where we're at. And I think Elon Musk and his strange, bizarre behaviors and some of the weird things his kids said and the fact that they're so close and that he has no experience is certainly a bizarre partnership that doesn't make much sense and could illuminate a much darker relationship that's there. I don't know if that's true. All I can point out is red flags that I'm seeing. Okay, now we're going to go to a special segment that we've been doing. This is an update on the CalExit movement. Jason Wright has recently been moved from CEO to chairman of the board for CalExit now. Professor Xavier Mitchell has now been brought on as acting CEO for CalExit. I retain my role as president and spokesperson. Professor Xavier Mitchell is a multimillionaire. He owns 6 publicly traded companies, that means on the stock market, 1 nonprofit out of San Diego, and he's very well connected to Shirley Weber, who's the 3rd most powerful politician in all of California. He reached out to Jason and myself and asked to help organize the CalExit movement. Jason and myself went down to LA and we spent 10 hours one day and 8 hours the next day meeting with him. Then we did about a 16-hour Excel sheet job where we gave him all the data he needed. He has been bringing on new people like doctors and lawyers and philosophers. He has extensive contacts. Jason has been vetting these people and basically building a leadership core with Professor X. While you may not have seen a lot on the surface, the fact is that Jason is doing about 8 to 12 hours a day of phone calls with different people, Sacramento, San Diego, Oakland, San Francisco, Fresno, LA, Santa Monica, who can be what we call reliable leaders. One of the problems that we found was that a lot of people came and said, I want to help. Not everybody who wants to be a leader is dependable. Their heart is in the right place, of course. But to be a volunteer leader, you have to be emotionally stable. You have to be willing to show up on time. You have to be able to respond to emails and phone calls at least within a few hours. And if you can't do those things, it's really not going to work out. You also have to be capable with meeting all sorts of new people who may have quirky personalities and just kind of looking past that and figuring how to get them to work. It's not something everybody's built for, has the skill set for, the inclination or the natural desire or ability to do. That is not a mark on anybody. The people who can't be in leadership are foot soldiers. They're out there collecting petitions, collecting pictures, spreading the word. That's the most important job that you do. One of the things that we said is the leadership core that we're bringing on board is not important. They support the people on the ground. That is their only job. So while we're placing people in leadership, they're actually below the people on the ground. The people on the ground who are being seen collecting signatures, having conversations, spreading this on social media, talking to other Californians, calling their legislators and saying, I demand the blue ribbon panel now and a vote for independence now, and spreading word for that, writing editorials. You're number one. You're the most powerful. They're building a leadership structure of people underneath to lift you up to the highest plateau so that you can do the most. Jason's been doing about 8 to 10, 12 hours some days of interviews, phone calls, et cetera, bringing people on. We've identified a core of about 12 to 25 people who represent almost every major metro area across California, who meet the qualifications that I just mentioned, and we're going to be bringing them on soon. They're going to be falling into the organizational structure being designed by Professor X, who has personally built 6 companies that are all publicly traded and a very successful nonprofit to help the homeless and disadvantaged minorities in San Diego. His work has been seen by many powerful players in California, including high-ranking officials in the California government who have saluted him for his work. He's also, by the way, a veteran, and he was knighted. Yes, actually knighted. Sir Queen King. His actual title's Sir Professor Xavier Mitchell. I call him, it's Sir Dr. Xavier Mitchell. I call him Professor X because I grew up with the X-Men, and Jason and I asked if we could do that. And he said, sure, I'll be your Professor X. He said, okay. He's African-American. Patrick Stewart was Caucasian, but I think we're all going to work past that, and it'll work. Additionally, there's myself. I'll still be the speaker. We're building different committees. The other day, we had 2 different doctors, the former spokesperson for the Riverside County Medical Board and a Beverly Hills podiatrist who serves the 1%'s children got together and have started forming a medical commentary board for CalExit. We're also building one for lawyers, agriculture, space tech, transportation, business, and the entertainment sector, because Professor Xavier has multiple contacts in the entertainment sector. That's Professor X's idea. His concept is you have to get everybody in California on board with CalExit. And the way that you do that is you approach people by interest sectors. So you take divisions, industries, you break them up into interest groups, and then you explain to each interest group how CalExit benefits them. We'll have people from that industry or expert group help advise the CalExit core on how to speak back to that industry so that they know that there's a win for them in CalExit. That's largely what we're doing. You can expect an organization, an officer corps, and a lot more professional media like you've never seen coming up in just a very few days or weeks. That's Marc Ruiz Evans here, and this is our conclusion and sign-off. That does it for another episode of California Unfiltered. Remember, the summit is this Saturday. Jason Wright's website is calexitnow.org. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep questioning the status quo always. This is Marc Ruiz Evans signing off. I'll see you soon, California.